I was always trying to do my best, you know? I always
Uh-huh.
I considered it my, like, life's work, even if nobody ever heard it, you know?
Yeah.
Every time you say you wanna know me,
Do you think that growing up in the music scene in Philly, like, has a very particular Philly vibe that maybe is unique to that city? Do you feel like you have that perspective?
Well, I moved here when I was 17, so I definitely, like, grew up as a musician here. I think the city definitely had an influence on the way that people approach music and, like, the ethics.
Ethics, how so?
I don't know, just the values that people had. I mean, it was a very scrappy city at the time. There wasn't a lot of industry attention on Philly at all. Like Diplo was from here randomly, and like there's always hip hop going on. But as far as like indie rock or like punk music or whatever, like the kind of world that I was in,
Yeah.
it was pretty scrappy and like largely unnoticed
Yeah.
at the time. And that I think that it just had a really like DIY kind of ethic to it where nobody expected to really make a living off of it, and people just had like a really staying true to yourself,
Yeah.
what you do in your community feeling to it. But yeah, like I always kind of gravitated towards music like that, you know, stuff that felt like it was just like a normal person making it. I feel like really resonated with me because that's what I felt like. And that is, you know, and it felt really attainable. And then I realized that you writing songs like that's really hard.
Yeah. That's funny.
But like the
Oh,
execution seemed like, you know, it's like people who like didn't sing perfect and, you know, it's not recorded in $1 million studio. But I also didn't really understand that a lot of them actually were just normal people and that they were like just working some job also.
isn't that wild?
Like I think when I was like 17, 18, like if I was listening to something, I assumed that if it had reached me, I was like, well, they must be,
They must be rich. Yeah.
not rich or even, but just like, oh, they don't also like work at a restaurant, which a lot of the
Yeah.
time they did.
Yeah.
Definitely the Glow Part 2 was really big for me, the Microphones album. The early Elliott Smith stuff too, which, I mean, I liked the later stuff too, but it was the first time that I heard music that was like soft and pretty like that, where I kind of got the same feeling from it. And then that kind of opened the door to like a lot of like, because before I just thought that stuff was like really corny and like I was like, oh, like people like my parents or even like that, and I wanted stuff to
Yeah.
be like I was into like, you know, like Slipknot when I was
Yeah. You
I
want
was-
an edge to it.
you know, I wanted stuff that like really felt like intense and like it was like, I mean, and that was really popular music, but it felt like, you know, to a fifth grader at the time, like my parents hated it. They thought it
Yeah.
was like, really offensive and like horrible and like, you know, it felt really like extreme at the time. And I think
Yeah.
it was for like stuff that was like playing on like
That's funny.
MTV or whatever.
I don't know if it's just like the way my algorithm is pushing stuff to me now, but I'm getting all of these interviews with the Slipknot guys with their masks off, which like is this
Bro.
whole new way of presenting them. And like you
I'm
see how
very-
like older, like they're kind of older than you might have guessed because the masks like conceal their age, and it's just a new way of like, oh, they're real people. It's just this interesting way to sort of take this very intense, aggressive music and be like, it's just made by dudes.
I mean, was a kind of a crazy part of their whole thing that I think,
Yeah.
you know, it made it seem so otherworldly. And
It
also,
did.
I guess they really never were unmasked like they
Yeah.
totally like
Yeah.
were that famous and probably pretty rich, and they could still like completely go about their daily lives without, you know, the
Yeah.
stuff that, like Chapel Rowan is like talked about
Right.
today and Mitski and stuff where they're like
I hate
lives
this. Yeah.
totally like upended by people recognizing them and harassing them.
Have you ever had a moment like that where someone's like recognized you and it's like made you sort of feel like, oh, what I do is existing outside of, you know, my head and my recordings?
I mean, it actually happens pretty often, like around here, but more recently it happened in other places, which is strange.
Yeah, I'm
Just
sure.
like in Chicago, we were like getting these dumplings at this like random place that wasn't even that close to the venue, and somebody was like, "I'm coming to your show later," and it was awesome.
Yeah, that's great. What a compliment.
You know?
You were talking about Elliott Smith a moment ago, and you're talking about the pop music and stuff. And for me, as I was listening to your stuff, I kept going back to the Royal Tenenbaums soundtrack because like listening to your stuff sort of reminded me of some of the moods of like the Mark Mothersbaugh stuff on there. And of course, Hay is on that soundtrack. Do you think about film or any sort of non-musical influences as you're writing?
I don't really think about it, but I think it is there. When I'm watching a movie or something, or even like a cartoon, like I feel like not even just the soundtrack, but the way that the soundtrack just interacting with the other sounds in it, like I'm very captivated by that. And I think really nostalgic for like an older version of that.
You mean like old Warner Brothers cartoons or new stuff?
Yeah,
Like,
stuff like that with like orchestras.
Isn't that so crazy that they used to do that? I don't know that there's a contemporary equivalent to that where they're bringing like this sort of, I'm going to use the term high art classical stuff with like the, the punch him in the face, blow him with dynamite stuff. Just like, so it's such a cool mishmash. Talk to me a little bit about how did you come to like actually playing the guitar?
I just like was always enamored with like rock music.
Yeah.
And even like when I was a kid, I think it was like, really like classic rock, like the Doors and like Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. I just was like obsessed with it and thought it was so cool. And I thought even like, in like the 90s or whatever, I still thought it felt like really like urgent. And my parents wanted me to do other instruments in school. And my mom had me like piano lessons at like church for a little bit and she wanted to take piano lessons, but it was kind of like, she could do it if she brought us to do it also. And then I think I just like wouldn't shut up about the guitar and like dropped everything else. And my dad came home with this like half size or 3/4 size guitar that he probably got for like $50. And it was like such a piece of shit. And the action was so high.
Yes.
That it was like I would have to play it now, let alone when I was like 12 or whatever. And he came home with that. And I was always pretty serious about it, honestly. Not in like I was always trying to do my best, I always think I considered it my like life's work, even if nobody ever heard it,
Yeah.
It was just like, this is what I put my time and energy to.
I can imagine that being hard to pull off, being that serious about it and being a young person in a band. Maybe not everyone shares that level of seriousness.
At that point, it didn't translate towards like actual work ethic in the real world. Like it was really like this like fantasy.
Yeah.
That I think at some point like started translating into actual like real world work ethic. But at that time, like I didn't know what that meant. Like I didn't know what making music as your life's work meant. And it seemed like, and the way it was portrayed with bands like Green Day and Blink-182 was that they just like fucked off all the time. And they happened to like shit out these songs and recordings. And then they like toured the world. And it didn't like, it was kind of this like, I mean, I'm pretty sure that those are probably very hardworking bands, but it wasn't the image that was portrayed. And I didn't, I had no way of comprehending the difference between the marketing and the reality. I was like, oh, so I guess they like, just goof off a lot.
Yeah. That's actually a really astute observation. It's a disservice to all the aspiring punk bands to like give this persona like you're just jerking off all the time. And then the hits just roll out and then we book our world tour.
And they're fucking not. They were nerds.
Yeah.
You could tell by the songs.
So it's interesting you talked about, sort of like maybe a little jokingly about, that it didn't translate to the hard work ethic, but then you moved to Philly, which we've established as like this blue collar hardworking town. So was that transition when you finally moved over to Philly? Was that like a big part of, okay, let's take this to the next level?
I think totally. Yeah. And I think in a way, and I started like, I think right before I moved to Philly, I kind of like, I wasn't really doing bands anymore. And I was more like gravitating towards just the acoustic guitar in my room. Type of thing. My work ethic as far as like making songs and writing songs shot up immensely. But as far as like playing shows and like doing all the other stuff, it didn't really, which I think maybe was actually a good thing because I think that writing songs has to come first.
Well said and very true. You were talking earlier about how you weren't interested in the acoustic guitar, but then you slowly sort of transitioned to it. What do you think caused that sort of shift in your approach?
Definitely Elliott Smith and the microphones. Like I was just like, oh, I want to rip this off now. There's definitely some like early demos that I like put that, at the time I had put up on like MySpace. It was like before Bandcamp even then.
Yeah.
I put backup just because, like, not because I think that they're very good, but I think that they existed.
And you want to give them their space.
Yeah, they're part of like, with my history, I guess. And
That's that life's work thing that you're talking
Yeah.
about. Like you're interested in that, right? You're building it. That's cool.
And they're not very good, I don't think, and I definitely wasn't very good at lyrics, but you can tell what I'm trying to do. And
Yeah.
some of them are kind of cool, and I'm definitely experimenting with things maybe a little bit more, and I'm a little bit more like self-conscious,
Yeah.
particularly about being interesting or something like that. I remember being like really afraid of things being boring or like predictable in a way that I think
Like musically, lyrically, all of it.
yeah, both. Like lyrically, I was like afraid of like people being able to figure out what I was talking about. And musically, it was, it was around the time of like all the indie rock at the time, and indie pop was very orchestrated and weird arrangements and like, fucking different crazy instruments and sounds. And that was kind of what people were like thinking made things good or not. So I think I was a little bit self-conscious about like not doing some of that stuff.
Come back to me. He'll make you happy. Come back to